Okay, hi everyone. So my name's Amy Rusby. I'm from Neurodiversity Plus, which is a company that provides support, guidance, and tuition for people with special educational needs and EHCPs in place. So I wanted to take this opportunity today to really give answers to really commonly asked questions surrounding an EHCP. So I'm going to cover what it is, how the process works, and the benefits of it. I'm going to do it in terms of a question and answer session. I've got pre-prepared questions that people have put to me in advance of the session. But there will also be an opportunity for anybody to ask questions via the chat. And obviously, if at the end, because obviously people are not always watching it live, there will be an opportunity to contact me and ask me questions directly through my page or through Autism Connect as well. So my background is I'm a health professional and have been a qualified neurophysio since 1997. Within that, I have done quite a lot of work over the last few years in mental health, and particularly working with people with neurodivergence and their families. And I'm also a parent of a 14-year-old son who has ADHD, and I'm actually myself and his dad are going to be in the process of applying for an EHCP in the at the beginning of the new school year in September. So this is a subject which is very close to me. I'm very passionate about it, and even though I know a lot about it, I still find it quite daunting. And I think people without the knowledge that I have about neurodivergence and about EHCPs can find it incredibly anxiety provoking. So I really wanted to just give information, help people in that way, but also to let people know that we are there if people need support. We can help with that as well. So the audience today is a mixture of people. My presentation is aimed predominantly at parents who have children or young adults with special educational needs, but it is also open, and professionals have been invited to join as well. So there's a mixture of tutors, teachers, occupational therapists, speech and language therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists. Just it's open to anyone who might benefit from a little bit more understanding about the EHCP. Okay, so my friend and colleague Keith, who is a paediatrician, is going to ask the questions that have been put to us in advance of this session, so we'll make a start.
Thanks, Amy. The obvious place to start is, what is an EHCP? What does EHCP even stand for?
Okay, so it stands for Educational Health and Care Plan. It is a legal document, and it's for anybody up to the age of 25 years old who has special educational needs. So it's a common misconception that it is just for children. It's actually young adults as well. And because it is a legal document, there are really big advantages of having one, which I'll cover as we go on as well. The EHCP itself actually replaced the statement of need, which again has advantages. The statement of need was much more based on diagnosis and education alone, whereas this EHCP that has now taken over is very much more holistic. So it actually covers the social, educational, emotional, and mental health needs of the individual child or young adult. It has what's called SMART outcomes. So that's SMART in capital letters abbreviation. That stands for strategic, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. Now, that's all really important. It's not just sort of language that's used to make it sound good. It really is important, particularly the time bound and the relevance. We'll talk about how the plan gets updated as we go through, and it needs to be time bound in terms of, like, for example, saying by the end of the summer term or by the end of year 9, whatever it is, so that there's an actual relevance to where the child or young person is at in their stage of life. The structure, as I say, it's a really holistic structure, and it incorporates 4 broad areas of special educational needs. So the first one is cognition and learning, which is obviously where the education part comes in. But then there's something called SEMH, which you might have heard of, which stands for social, emotional, and mental health. And there's the third one is communication and interaction. And the fourth one is sensory and or physical needs as well. So it incorporates all of that, which is why it's, as I say, very holistic and broad-based. The timelines, as I say, are really important to make it relevant. And it has to be very specific about the provision. So if somebody is identified as having special educational needs, it needs to be very clear who is going to provide that provision, what is it that's going to be provided, how are they going to do it, how often and when, and where it's going to take place. So it's all very specific, and as I say, because it's a legal document, it's binding. So it makes accessing that help a lot easier.
Gosh, that's a lot broader than I had understood, and I already learned something because I didn't know it went up to age 25.
No, a lot of people don't.
Not quite for my. I'm only marginally older than 25, but interesting. When's an EHCP appropriate then?
So if you have a child or a young person who has special educational needs, they should have already been registered as having those needs at school or college. If they haven't, they need to be. But normally what happens is that when a student or pupil at school or college is registered as having special educational needs, they are, as I say, registered as having those needs, and provisions should be put in place to try to help them to meet those needs. So that might be something like a reduced timetable or an adjusted timetable. It might be that they have sort of extra emotional support at school. They might have somebody that's identified as their sort of go-to person. It might be that they have extra peer support at school. It might be that they have sort of an additional plan regarding homework and parent support and things like that. But if after about a year, those provisions have been tried but haven't actually succeeded in meeting all of the needs, that's when you need to look at whether to start looking at going down the route of an EHCP. Because the sooner it gets put in place, the better. Really, because, as I say, those needs are not just identified, but that's the starting point. It's then how those needs are going to be met and everything gets put in place accordingly. So it really is where everything can come together to give you the support that your child needs.
Okay. Sounds as though it could do quite a lot then for children, young people and their families. So the obvious next question is, how do people go about getting an EHCP?
Yeah, that's a good question. And there are 3 ways that it can happen. Whichever method you go down, the timing of it, the process is exactly the same. The only difference is in the application, and that is in terms of who makes the application. So it can be parent-led, it can be student-led if they're over the age of 16. If they're not over the age of 16, they can't apply for it themselves. It would have to be by the parent or guardian. But the other the other way of applying is the school can lead the application. So when you make an application, you don't make an application for an EHCP straight away. You make an application for an education and healthcare needs assessment. The means by which you make that application doesn't really matter. The local authorities do sometimes prefer that you fill out a form online, but they are legally required to take notice of your application in whatever form it comes. So if you feel more comfortable to write them a letter, if you don't like going online or whatever, or don't have access to the internet, that's fine. If you want to email, that's fine. So whichever way, they have to take that as a formal application. The bar for a needs assessment is low, which is a good thing because it means that it's quite accessible for people. There have to be two things that apply in order for an EHC needs assessment to be granted. That is, it has to be of the local authority have to be of the opinion that there are special educational needs. So by this stage, it's pretty obvious anyway. So that's a, as I say, a low bar. And the second one is that it may be necessary for special educational provision to be put in place in accordance with an EHCP. So again, that's kind of obvious because that's why we'd be looking at getting one in the first place. So those are the two criteria that need to be met. And as long as those are met, then it should be awarded that you can apply for the, well, you are applying, but you can be granted an assessment.
Okay, sounds like it could be very useful for a lot of people. So what actually happens next? How long does it take to get it done?
So the application to the local authority, once they receive that, they have 6 weeks to decide whether the education healthcare assessment is needed. If they decide that it is, it then gets assigned to what they call an EHC coordinator. So that's an education healthcare coordinator. The main role of that person is to gather evidence and to put that evidence together. So the evidence that we're talking about is things like proof of diagnosis, if the child already has a diagnosis. If they don't, then perhaps a letter from the doctor. It's also important to have, if there are any other professionals involved, so anyone such as an educational psychologist, a psychiatrist, that's all really, really relevant to go into the application and the evidence. So anyone who is involved, including obviously the school or college in their existing setup. And also what's really important and really reassuring, I think, is that in this evidence gathering, the parents and the child's views are put forward as well. So, as I say, I find as a parent that that's really reassuring for me, because although mine and my child's needs might be slightly different, everyone's needs or views rather need to be taken into account, because obviously you know, at the end of the day, it's going to affect our family life and yours as well. So there should be a multi-agency meeting as part of this evidence gathering as well. So basically, once the coordinator has spoken to everybody or gathered the pieces of information in terms of reports or letters from anybody that's involved, school reports as well, then there's a meeting at which the parents obviously are part of it as well. They do attend that meeting. So you're very much included. It's not something that's kind of passively done and then inflicted on you or your child. It is something that you're very much involved with. Once that's all been taken place, a draft of the EHCP is made, and that's issued within 14 weeks. So after that 14 weeks, when everybody receives the draft copy of the EHCP, the parents have 15 days in which to study it and make a decision as to whether, obviously, if you agree with everything that's in it, or if there are any points that you feel need changing or discussing. When a named party is in that EHCP draft as well, so that could be a tuition company, such as ourselves, or it could be an educational psychologist, or it could be a psychiatrist, psychologist, and anyone that you want to be the provider of that provision for your child. They also receive the draft of the EHCP, and they have 15 days to respond as well. So they basically have the same length of time as you do to respond to it. And then once everybody has had that opportunity, the final version is made.
How do you go about them making, because it sounds as though it can be quite complicated. What makes an EHCP effective? How do you make a really effective EHCP?
Yeah, so unfortunately, some are better than others. There's no actual standardized sort of version. Obviously, they will all include the same types of information, but the level of detail does vary from one to another. So any of the professionals working with EHCPs that are listening in, I'm sure will have experienced some more helpful than others. The best ones are the ones with the most evidence, that, when I was saying about the evidence gathering, and that's really crucial. And the identification of all of the special educational needs, so not just the learning, but also the social, the emotional, and the mental health as a whole, all needs to be taken into account. And the reason why that makes the best, most effective EHCP is because it needs the detail in the EHCP of the specific requirements of that person, but also how they're going to be met. And as I say, it's got to be time bound, it's got to be relevant to that person at that point in time. So it needs to be kept up to date. And that's the way of making them most effective. But again, because they are legally bound, they are pretty effective, because the named party who's going to provide whatever it is that your child needs has accountability and a responsibility to do so as the named party in that report or plan.
Sounds as though it could be very useful. But what if my child's school are reluctant to help with an EHCP, or actually don't think there should be an EHCP? Can I do it without them?
Yes, you actually can. A lot of people, well, not that many. More schools are sort of helpful than not. But unfortunately, there are instances where either the school doesn't feel it's appropriate for some reason, but the parents do, or if they are not really very well resourced or have the right things in place to put provisions in place themselves. If the school are not in agreement, obviously then it would become a parent-led, or if the student is over 16, it could be a student-led application for the needs assessment, and then obviously going on to the EHCP from there. Whichever way, whoever applies for it, it is still necessary for the school to comply to an extent, because they need to be able to provide the reports and the documents that are requested of them. But again, that's quite standard. So even though they might not be putting the application forward, they would still need to be participating to an extent. But obviously everyone's views get taken into account, and that would probably be most likely to be discussed in detail at the multi-agency meeting, because that really is the opportunity where everyone can sit around the table and put their views across and work out a plan going forward.
So I'm a paediatrician, and I know that across the country there can be enormously long waits, maybe years, for assessments for neurodiversity. Does a child need to have a formal diagnosis before they can have an EHCP constructed for them?
They actually don't, which is really interesting, and it was actually not until fairly recently that I knew this. But because of the long waiting lists, it's recognised that it is extremely difficult to get a diagnosis, or I should say to get an assessment to make a diagnosis or not. And I think that because of the length of waiting lists and the demand on the resources, it's really common for people to struggle on for about 3 years before they actually get seen to make that assessment and finally get either a diagnosis or not. If people have the means to do so, they can go for a private assessment to diagnose whether it's an autism assessment or an ADHD assessment, dyslexia, dyscalculia, whatever it is. They can go and get that assessment done privately. And the good news as well is that at one time, private assessments were not really considered to be unbiased or sort of as official, maybe, as non-private ones, but that is and has changed a lot. So private assessments are being done more and more, and the reports following those assessments with the diagnosis, and not just the diagnosis in terms of a name of a condition as such, but it's more how that is affecting the child or the young person. So it will be in terms of the presentation. And that's again linking back to when we were saying earlier about the EHCP being more holistic and incorporating the social, emotional, and mental health aspects of a child's needs. Particularly in the case where there isn't a diagnosis, they can still have very obvious needs that need to be addressed. And that's where, again, the evidence gathering comes in to really show that and to work out a plan of how that could be helped going forward.
So what sort of things can EHCP help with? What can it fund?
Okay, so there are 3 main things that it can be helpful for in terms of funding. Obviously, from the education side, the learning support. So that can be in terms of a centre for education. So it can be an actual school or college, whether it's a special school or whether it's a mainstream school with support, the special educational needs support put in place. That it can be either. It can also fund, as I said before, tutoring. And that can be alongside the school, whether it is a special school or not, it doesn't matter. It can be alongside that. Or it can, in some cases, be as a means of alternative provision. So if for any reason school is not, or college is not the best environment for that child, and it's deemed that they are needing to be learning in a different environment or from home, then alternative provision can be funded through it as well. As I said earlier, Neurodiversity Plus offers tutoring packages, and our whole company is specialised in the area of special educational needs, and we can be named as the provider on the EHCP itself. In a school setting, the EHCP can also provide funding for one-to-one support within the classroom. But it's really important that again, it's made specific. So it's not any use to say, oh, this child will need a one-to-one for some lessons on some days of the week, sort of thing. It needs to be really specific to say what subject they need that one support in. It might even detail the aspect of the subject that they need that support in. And also it might be that they are needing, you know, a set level of input. So it might be 60 minutes daily, or it might be 30 minutes daily, or whatever it is. It needs to be made clear. And the EHCP can also help with funding any equipment that's needed, and that can be really helpful for people with dyslexia. And also it's something that can be really helpful with if people are struggling with focus and attention. There are certain things that can be provided which can give a bit of help with that as well. In addition, though, to the education side, the EHCP can help with funding for enrichment. So that is basically activities outside of school or college. So it might be pursuing hobbies and interests, or some social skills. It might be a sport that the child or young person particularly enjoys. It might be something like accessing going to clubs or scouts. It can be anything. It might be sex education for somebody who's sort of, later in their teens. It can be anything that is deemed as being relevant to the outside of education side of things for that child or young person. Enhancing social interaction, mental health and well-being, opportunities in later life as well. Obviously, it can affect with what they can do going forward. And it can also have sensory benefits. And the other area that it can really help with is funding for professional involvement. So if it is deemed that the child would benefit from, say, speech and language therapy or psychology, or extra tuition, occupational therapy, whatever it is, again, as long as that's identified, justified within the EHCP and determined specifically sort of how much and how often and who and everything, then that can be funded. And that can be really helpful as well, because those people, those professional people, can also input to the EHCP. So when the reviews come along, they can actually kind of make a bigger picture of the progress that's being made.
How often are EHCPs reviewed then? You just mentioned that.
Yeah, they have to be reviewed at least yearly. So once a year is mandatory. If there's a requirement, it can be requested to be sooner. They do importantly need to be up to date. So as long as it's once a year at the very minimum, then that's fine.
I think we have quite a lot of questions to get through. I think you've already covered this one about whether parents and child's views are taken into account. You told us they are. Is there anything you wanted to add there?
Yeah, as I say, it's part of the evidence gathering with the coordinator. It's part of the multi-agency meeting, and it does get formally included in the plan. So two really common areas that are considered here are placement location. So for example, if a parent wants to place their child into a different school that could better meet their needs, there are things that need to be taken into account, like obviously the geographical area, the practicality of going there, transport. If transport is needed, then again, that would be something that funding would be accommodated with as well. And obviously from the practicality, if you're a parent, you've got two children or more and they go to different schools, obviously you can't be in two places at once at the start of the day dropping them off. So it might be that they need to, that needs to be taken into account as well. And also for the emotional well-being of the child, if there are siblings who already go to a particular school, and it would be helpful sort of emotionally and psychologically for your child to go to the same school as they do, providing that they can meet the needs, then obviously that can be taken into account. Or it might be that they're at a school that's close by or that sort of thing. The other thing in terms of parents' views, again, I've already covered it, is the choice of provider. So which tutoring company you're going to use, whether it's us or whether it's another one, which psychologist you're going to use, whatever it is, you can make that decision of who you want to be involved in your child's care.
So I think you let us know now, because the next question was, can I choose where my child is placed? And I think you've told us that parents can have a lot of input into that.
They certainly can. Yeah, they definitely can. There are specific types of placement, and there are criteria that the local authority must follow. But they can only refuse your choice of placement if it's unsuitable for any reason in terms of age, ability, aptitude, or the special educational needs can't be met there. Then obviously then that's not going to be deemed as appropriate. The other reason why it may be turned down is if they consider it incompatible with the provision of efficient education for the other students at the school. So if the needs of the child would be so much that it would impact on other people that are already there, then that might be, turned down. But otherwise, there's, they would have to have a very good reason not to go with your choice.
So I think you've hinted at this. There can be disagreements. Can a parent challenge an EHCP?
They can. If parents don't agree with everything that does end up being put into the EHCP, they can go to appeal, and that's done via the SEND tribunal, which is the Special Educational Needs and Disabilities Tribunal, and we do help people with that as well.
You've mentioned quite a few of these. So what are the advantages of having an EHCP then?
So in summary, I think it gives insights into the needs of the individual child. Obviously, every child is different and everyone's needs are going to be different. Even with the same diagnosis, people can present completely differently. So it really helps to determine the initial interactions of, it's sort of like a really good starting point in a way to know what the needs are, where we're going to start. So who do we need to get involved if they're not already involved? If they are already involved, what developments need to be made to that plan? And it enables clear target setting. So this can be, from an educational point of view, an individual learning plan can be made as a result of it, which means that the child is going to have very specific targets to meet, and it's going to be formulated in such a way that obviously is going to be helpful to their understanding. It might be on the mental health side of things. It might be an individual program for anxiety management. And also it can be an individual plan for social interaction. So again, it incorporates all of those different areas. And it really, one of the really good things about it, as I've said before, is that it is like a timetable for goals to be met. So it is, provides a time frame, which makes it more useful and relevant. And because it is a legal document, things have to happen. So there is accountability, as I say, and because it has frequent reviews, at least yearly, it does mean that it's kept up to date.
Sounds like EHCPs can be very helpful. What are your top tips then to parents?
So I would say be as involved as you can possibly be. So right from the beginning, you want to be involved, you want to be expressing your views, you want to be expressing your child's views, or on their behalf, or if they're an older child, they can express them themselves, make sure that they're involved, participate as much as you can, because you don't, as I say, want it to be a plan that's made for you and your family. You want it to be a plan that's made with you and your family. So the other thing is to keep on top of it. So as I say, it is legally binding. Things have to, if that's the plan, that has to happen. But obviously, things happen and things don't always go to plan. And if something isn't being provided, or you're not happy with the way that things are being provided, or if you feel that something is missing from that plan, you obviously have the opportunity to express that. And that really gives such a positive start for a child from where they are, because it gives them a really good opportunity for success with fulfilling their potential and their future. The other thing that I would say is that it is a lengthy process, and it is stressful and it's daunting. So look after yourself as a parent. I think that's one of the things that people say to me all the time is, you know, look after yourself, because you can't support anybody else if you're not on top form yourself. So, you know, make sure you follow all the usual advice about sort of taking care of yourself, exercising, sleeping well, eating well, drinking plenty of water, all those things. Just look after your own mental health. So to finish, just to summarise really, that Neurodiversity Plus offers direct support as well as information on EHCPs. So we help with applying for the needs assessment, participating in meetings. We can help support expressing the parents and the young person's views, so we can be sort of like acting as an advocate. We really stress the importance of keeping the plan up to date, so that's essential, and we will help to keep on top of ensuring that the provision is there according to the plan. Although the EHCP is complex and can be really daunting, it does make a massive difference. So please do get in touch with us by our website, which is www.ndp.org.uk, or on our Facebook page. All our initial consultations are free. After that, we form a plan together with our clients, and that's at £60 an hour. We do have the tuition packages, which are specially put together for people with special educational needs. And if you have one of those packages, then that automatically includes the support anyway. So there's no additional fee if you're having the tutoring, but you can have one or the other. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, EHCP. So thank you ever so much for attending today. I hope it's been helpful. And I will look forward to answering any further questions that anybody has. There's obviously been an opportunity to see it live, but there will be a recording going out as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Amy.
Thank you.